Ooh, we're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas. Fisher, DeSopoulos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider. Just when we thought things were very difficult for our Longhorn running back room, we lost another running back to a knee injury. Christian Clark, the freshman, number 6, a number that is dear to us because of Quan Cosby, our co-host. Christian Clark, his freshman year, tears his ACL, unfortunately. As a team, as fans, like that obviously, shortens our running back depth chart again. But for him as a young player, it's like the last thing you want to see. This guy's coming in, giving it his all. One of the other freshmen coming into the mix and wanting to be the next great Longhorn running back or one of the great Longhorn running backs and give his all to a team. This is the last thing you want to see for a young player. So we're wishing Christian Clark speedy recovery. Excited to see him on the field next year. He'll get his red shirt this year from injury, and he'll have hopefully a long, productive career in burnt orange and 40 acres. But gut checks, guys. There's rumors that Ryan Niblett, the redshirt freshman, could be headed to the running back room, which that kind of makes things pretty interesting.
Makes total
I'm
sense.
trying to find Quinn's yards for the
we
over.
we have a pretty crowded running or wide receiver room as it is, and so getting these guys touches as much as possible and keeping them happy and keeping them in the program, getting them playing time, I think is crucial. And especially if you're weak right now at the running back position, you've got Trey Wisner, you've got Jared Gibson, and you have Jaden Blue, which is 3 healthy running backs. But as we all know, it's the most injury-prone position in all of football, and there's a lot of wear and tear, and you need healthy, fresh legs all the time. So I could totally see Niblett. I could also see Butler, the freshman athlete that came in, who's working at receiver out of California that we brought in last minute. He's a 4-star recruit. He played DB and wide receiver, but he's the type of guy who's got a lot of speed, and I feel like he's going to be itching to get some playing time. But I think the one thing that you just can't really coach right now is size. It's so late in the game that they didn't have time to really put on that weight that a running back usually requires. But at the same time, Keelan Robinson found success last year as a running back, on the more slender, small side. Obviously he didn't get playing time like Bijan or Roshan or Brooks or Jaden Blue did, but at the same time, he was good out of the backfield, in short yardage situations. So, I could totally see some of our wide receivers stepping up in that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Apparently Niblett and Juan Davis, tight end Juan Davis, have both spent time working with the running backs since the recent injuries in practice. So they're going to show different looks in practice up until week 1 and see if guys can get in there and how they look. And granted, you're absolutely right, Nick, about the lack of reps that these guys have had in the offseason. And these injuries just kind of throw us in a bit of a bind from a decision-making standpoint. But there's a lot of different things that Sark has shown that he can do with guys that are lined up in the quote unquote running back position. Right. So that is the optimistic thing. But yeah, I mean, look, Butler, I think we've been talking about him potentially changing positions since he committed. And we were like, well, one of these wide receivers seems like they're probably going to get turned into a corner. And we just didn't think that it was going to be turned into a running back. And we're potentially in that position, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And that's kind of what we're at already before we've even gotten to week 1, just from a roster standpoint. And we're making the adjustments that we need to. And yeah, we'll figure it out. The thing about Christian Clark is, like, we were talking about Jared Gibson once we found out the news about CJ Baxter. I mean, Clark would have been competing for those carries as well. He was a 4-star recruit too. So it is a devastating blow, as you mentioned, Josh, for him as an individual and of course for our program. But, just wishing a speedy recovery to both those guys.
Mm-hmm. It's just unfortunate, like you said, Nick, it's the most banged up position. So having depth there is vital. But we do have good depth at other spots. I know they are discussing Darian Gillette, like one of our linebackers in there. Again, just a guy like Juan Davis who has size. And I actually kind of like the Juan Davis thing a little bit from a running back standpoint. Like, look, at the end of the day, yes, you have to be able to run the football, but you also have to be able to catch passes. You also have to be able to block as a running back, especially in a system where we're dropping back now. And I think at least his asset as a tight end blocking, in the receiving game, I think Juan Davis is an interesting fit back there. Niblett, I like his looks too. And like the Keelan Robbins thing is very apt, he's a guy that, we could throw out, if he could go on a swing or if he could come out, do a wheel route, like he's capable and he's got great hands as a receiver. And that actually, in a positive, it gets him on the field, like we're saying, like in a way where he maybe not gets on the field again for the second straight year. So gets him his touches. But yeah, it's just like it is one of the last things you want to see because injuries beget injuries. It feels like when it rains, it pours sometimes. But Rojo switched positions. Roshan Johnson came in as a quarterback. He switched positions and ended up being a great running back for us.
And now he's an NFL running back.
Now starts, and he's not a starting running. He's a backup running back in the Bears. He's in their running back room that gets touches. He almost had 100 carries last year. I will say that there's an old saying in the theater: bad dress rehearsal, great show. So to me, this is a bad dress rehearsal for the Longhorns. Like things are going pretty poorly, I would say, from a run, at least from this one standpoint. Everything else we're hearing out of camp, which we'll get into in a second, is great. From the receivers, from the defensive players, from the offense, like everything else being reported is so fantastic. But this is just a glaring issue. I will say Blues got great experience as far as what you would want from the backup running back coming in to be the starter. And Gibson, yes, he was Clark was a touted recruit like Gibson was, but Gibson was a bigger fish and is supposed to be a bigger talent. So at least we have both those guys coming in. Mm-hmm. And like I said at the top, like Quinn's yards, if we can get them anywhere on any betting site, that would be the time to hammer Quinn's over on yards because we are going to be throwing this thing.
Yeah. And Texas A&M lost Ruben Owens too. They're starting running back. So it's not just us, but it's kind of plaguing the game right now. I mean, obviously there's other colleges out there and I'm sure people will go down, but you never want to see it to start the season, especially if it's little brother, you want little brother to have their full force when they get to play us. So there's no excuses.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, you never want, at the end of the day, you never want anyone to get hurt, right? I remember being a kid, like watching baseball. I'll never forget this, like watching Yankees and rooting for Alfonso Soriano. I was like 5 to get hit and getting in trouble for rooting for the opposing team to get injured. You never.
Well, I mean, every now and then it's fun to see a baseball player get drilled. If he's
and maybe in the ass or the back, but you don't want anyone to get hit in the head or hit in the hands, like you hit in a bad spot. Like you don't want anyone getting hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the last thing you want to see is these athletes who put so much time and effort in, whether you like their team that they play for or not, get injured. So I would hope that the same respect, at least I don't think that highly of the Aggies, but I would imagine the same respect would be given, like we're giving them on their part. So it's very unfortunate for Ruben Owens too, and you hate to see that.
I will say it's times like these where I'm grateful that guys like Jahdae Barron and Alfred Collins stayed on our roster because they had opportunities to certainly seek opportunities in the NFL, and they decided to stay on the 40 acres and be leaders of this team. Of course, that's on the defensive side of the ball, but those are just two guys that popped into my head as guys who were talented enough at least to try and see if they could get an opportunity on an NFL roster. And they have a veteran presence. I think I saw a quote from Barron just saying, like, we're incredibly optimistic despite the challenges we've already faced thus far. And as you mentioned, Josh, like all the reports from camp about the actual play for all the guys that are healthy and on the field has been fantastic. I mean, Malik Muhammad had a one-handed interception. Gillette also had an interception earlier this week in practice. So that makes me really optimistic about our defense, in particular our secondary, which got a lot of critique at the end of last season, and of course was diced up by Michael Penix in that receiving core of the Washington Huskies. So I know we're going to talk about some guys stepping up on the defensive side of the ball. My own individual pick is not in our secondary, but I love hearing that our secondary is ready to play already in camp.
Take us away then. Who is maybe not your predicted defensive MVP for our Texas Longhorns, but who is like the sneaky sleeper guy that you're hoping steps up and takes his game to the next level for us this year?
Yeah, obviously from a pressure on the quarterback situation and getting the statistical category of sacks on their ledger throughout the season, Burke and Sorrell are supposed to be our big guys there, right? Mm-hmm. And hopefully we see Simmons get some PT and make a name for himself early. But a guy who I think, has had limited opportunity, but has taken advantage of those opportunities, who's only played 7 games in his college career, edge linebacker Justice Finkley, who's a junior, I think is going to have a lot of opportunity to display his skills of getting to the QB and actually making opposing quarterbacks pay. It's one thing to get that pressure. It's another thing to execute and get that sack and put him on his ass and put him on the turf. So I'm expecting Finkley to, kind of creep into getting a lot more reps than we saw last year and even 2 years ago, where I think he might have played like a few snaps.
Yeah. Love that, Nick.
Yeah, I like that as well. I think every year we look to a senior leader, and obviously every single season, senior leaders end up going to the league or they end up not playing for us again. So we need to see someone step up this year. And I'm looking at David Gabenda. He's a 6-year guy, but has plenty of experience, especially manning that defense. Gets a lot of tackles for losses. Kind of one of those jump starter type guys, and he's going to be looking to add some stock for himself for the NFL draft. And I think he's a guy who can play on Sundays, maybe a late round guy or an undrafted free agent. But the senior leadership is always something that is paramount to our defense, no matter who it is. We've seen it with Overshawn and guys in the past before. So David Gabenda is my guy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a guy I could have mentioned alongside Collins and Barron that stayed, who could have sought out opportunities to potentially get on an NFL roster. I mean, he had, as we all talked about it, one of our favorite plays on the defensive side of the football last year against Alabama, where he broke into the backfield and Quan was like, that's an NFL ready tackle. So
yeah,
I love that pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's really, look, our team last year, the opponents only converted 26.5% on third down and 46% on fourth down. And we had 32 sacks last year, so we were a team that was airtight on third down, fourth down, and was good at getting after the quarterback. So I like those picks. I'm going to go with Vern Broughton. I want him to really step up and assume that, look, you don't have to be Murphy. You don't have to be Sweat, but you have to make enough of an impact that you can allow those guys that Toss mentioned, right? The Finkleys, the Burks, the Baron Sorrells, Trey Moore, who's coming in from UTSA, who was a monster, the Gabendas, the Anthony Hills, hopefully Simmons gets some run. Like, you have to make enough of an impact where those guys around you can get after the quarterback and we can get those sack numbers and keep that. To me, if you want to ask me, and we could do this, hope next time with Quan, like one number that we're looking at this year, that's the number I'm looking at, 26.5%. If you can keep the opponent third down conversion rate under 30%, we're going to be in the mix in the playoffs, and we're going to be in the mix for the national title, despite all the running back issues that we've had this offseason, unfortunately.
There were some people that were playing college football 25 and using Texas as their dynasty team. And people were saying that a couple of people said that Trey Moore was their Heisman winner in their season.
Wow.
And I will go to say that I started a dynasty as well in the game, and Trey Moore is a monster leading the nation in sacks. So
there you go.
It's my biggest, we all have our group texts with our friends. We obviously have each other, like so many various Texas group texts. One of the ones I'm in, it's one of the more prevalent ones, just the prominent ones are, I have constantly always information in there and heavy debate. One of the biggest debates is about whether Trey Moore can keep up his production. One guy thought that he was going to go to less than 5 sacks with our team. And I think it's not like the guy's coming from JUCO.
Well, I was about to say, like, coming to Texas, I feel like if anything, it gives you more production because there's more eyes on the other guys on the D line. Like at UTSA, you're the guy, right? But at the same time, like, UTSA no slouch anymore. Like, they've been ranked. They've kept us in close games before. They've had first round draft picks. I mean, Marcus Davenport, right? I mean, not say what you will about his NFL career, but he was a first round pick by the Saints coming out of UTSA off the edge. Tariq Woolen for the Seahawks. Like, they've got guys. So I don't think it's fair to poo-poo the UTSA, defense there. It's different if it's like you're coming over from D2 or JUCO or, even like a Division I AA school, but
FCS.
Exactly. But that they play in Conference USA, and they've been to bowl games. They played Texas for the past 2 seasons. Like, so I wouldn't, poo-poo UTSA or Trey Moore, but I think if anything, his productivity goes up.
I love that because it's so, think about all the doubles he was getting. if you're going to double a guy on the defensive line against UTSA, what are you going to? You're going to throw the left tackle, and you're going to chip him the tight end. You're going to throw like running back.
Right.
You're going to try to double the guy any way you can. You
And
can't
also,
necessarily double the guy when there's so much talent everywhere else across the board.
I think another thing that people don't ever really consider in college more than the NFL, and in the NFL as well, like these are still 18, 19, 20-year-old guys that 1 year of maturing changes their whole game. And like, yes, already he was a tank and a beast, but like we're talking about a guy who's under 21 years old, you know, as we all know, men, you know, they keep on growing until they're like 25 and 30 sometimes. So getting an extra inch, getting an extra few pounds, getting an extra burst, you know, some strength, explosive power, especially in the Texas weight room. I mean, I will say that, like, you know, my time at Texas, I can't really speak to any other weight rooms and you know, strength and conditioning programs, but we have one of the top strength programs in the world. I mean, there's a reason why University of Texas got as many medals as they did in the Olympics. I mean, you just took a look at athletics in general. I mean, if we were a nation, they said that Texas would come in 16th place just by medal count.
It's mind blowing how I mean, our facilities are crazy. We've all been there. They're crazy. And everyone that listens to our show knows that. I mean, again, like, and I almost threw Michael Taff in there. I don't want to cheat and give two, but like, he was a guy that was an unsung hero for us last year in the defensive backfield and stepping up, making plays. And you bring up the point of how much a year matters for a college player in football versus almost any other sport. Like their growth mentally, their growth physically, like it really is such like a game of months almost versus like, you know, how they say game of inches in football, but it's a game of months sometimes for these guys. So he's a guy that's had to work to get his spot. And I'm excited to see some of these safeties and DBs step up. I mean, we have a very interesting, you know, break down the Michigan game, but they have one of the best tight ends, and then if not the best tight end in the nation. So that's going to have to be a position where we see early on someone come to fruition as like a real guy that can make some hits and cover some big dudes.
Yeah, I think with the Trey Moore sack numbers, I mean, last year you mentioned, Josh, how many sacks we had collectively as a team.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be spread around amongst multiple guys once again.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is just a testament to the depth that we've already talked about from the linebacker position and the edge rusher position.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about those guys in conjunction with the injuries that we just sustained in our running back room is really, really important, because there's a possibility that we try and play a little bit more up tempo. We try and pass a little bit more, which makes your defense have to be out there sometimes a little bit more than you'd like them to, right?
Yeah.
And with that added depth in the linebacker room and from the edge rusher position, which we haven't really had in the past few years, it's going to be really, really crucial. Not to mention, you just talked about Taff. I'll throw out Makuba, and I already talked about Malik Muhammad, and we know how talented he is from a playmaking standpoint, where we can rely on them, and we're going to need those three guys, and of course the rest of the defensive backs, to turn over the quarterback, to intercept balls, and to also make big hits and recover some fumbles so that we can get some of that TOP back if we're trying to play up tempo with our offense. Like, it's just the pressure, of course, is on Quinn with these injuries to the running back room, but the pressure will also be on the defense to be a top 5 unit in college football throughout the entire season. And I think they're up for the task. And that's where I have a little bit of peace of mind when I'm just evaluating what these injuries do to our roster. We haven't seen this depth in the linebacking and edge rushing position. We just really have not seen it. Like, and look at the national champion last year. What were they able to do? Half of those edge rushers, you didn't even know who they were because they were just bringing in a new crew.
Well, that happened to Washington too. I mean, I unfortunately, you want another guy, Braylon Trice, who hurt us in the game. He tore his ACL too, which is so unfortunate in the NFL. But there was like so many guys on Washington. They were just kind of throwing a lot of seven different kinds of smoke at us. And we had that too. And we still have that. And it's even more so. And I love that point you bring up. It's like fresh legs. How many times we talk about fresh legs on offense, running back rooms, fresh legs, having fresh legs on defense. Like think about all the guys we listed: Sorrell, Moore, Finkley, Burke. Like Hill, Kabenda, it's
Hill.
crazy. Yeah, it's and Simmons. It's insane how many guys we can just run. We have multiple grad transfers on the defensive line too, outside of AC and Broughton. Like we have a lot of guys we could bring in here, and on the defensive backfield, you talk about Makuba. In the whole, I want to close how we started talking about the running backs. One thing we definitely did not mention, discussing injury, was TOP, and that's probably the scariest outside of you wanting these guys to be healthy in their futures. The second scariest part is what the running game brings to a team. Controlling the football, controlling time possession. The worst game I've ever seen Quinn play was against Oklahoma State, and that game went on for 2 years ago, went on for a millennium because of all the incompletions he threw. So controlling that time of possession is something, and you have to play a complementary football, like you're saying, Toss. Controlling that time of possession now that the running back room is getting sparse is definitely something that's very scary and looming in the back of my mind. And it's also, we're going to throw pressure around on Quinn and the defense. It's pressure on Sark to really doctor up plays that keep the ball in our hands. Yes, we want to score. Yes, we want to have those big chunk plays to excite the fans, excite the team, and inject some energy. But you also want to play smart football too, and you want to play the chess game, and you want to control the football and keep it at a certain team. Like you want to keep. We talked about the other day, right? Carson Beck. You want to keep that ball out of his hands. And I know that's looking down the line, but you want to keep the ball out of the hands of Donovan Edwards when we play Michigan and go in the big house. You want to keep the ball out of these playmakers' hands. So you have to control that clock.
Yep.
Agreed.
I mean, just the last thing I'll say, everybody always poo-poos Iowa's offense for sucking. But the one thing that Iowa has traditionally done really, really well is run the football and find their tight ends, right? And that at least can get you 3, 4, 5 first downs. Whether they're converting and getting points with their kicker or in the red zone is a different story. But their defense is always elite. And part of the reason is because they're not immediately giving the ball to the other team when their offense can't get it done. So it goes a long way. I still think that we're going to rely a lot on 13 personnel with our tight ends, even though, Juan Davis is getting reps at running back. We've got a deep tight end room as well. And so there's a lot of different guys that are going to be thrown out there by Sark and given opportunities to block, to catch passes, to catch screens. Screen game, obviously, in time possession is going to be huge. And so those receivers that we've already talked about, whichever ones can quickly get open for Quinn and beat their guy for 3 to 5 yards on first down, incredibly essential in our offense's success.
Brady method, man. I mean, Tom Brady, somehow at times that he not have a superior running back and just quickly picked you apart.
Yep.
I think Quinn Ewers is Tom Brady, but like it can be done in the passing game. It can be done in the passing game. And yeah. So anything else you want to add on anything, Nick, before we close out?
Nope. We hit it.
Hook 'em horns, guys. We'll see y'all next time. Fisher Sopless DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Crider.
Hook 'em.